Hindutva is a political ideology, it's really not a religious interpretation. They have created a political project around the idea that the people who follow the Hindu religion are a distinct people. 200 years of British rule, 1,000 years of Muslim invasions. Now the time has come for them to reassert themselves, and Hindutva is a project to advance the political agenda of those who believe this by trying to create a consciousness of separation amongst these self-defined Hindus. For me, what was troubling about this was that it bore very little resemblance to the Hinduism that I had grown up with. I know how devout my parents were. My mother still is alive, but my father, who is no more, was a very, very devout Hindu. But the Hinduism he practiced and believed to the very bone was a Hinduism of tolerance, of acceptance. In fact, I prefer the word acceptance to tolerance. And one in which he got along extremely well and showed a great deal of respect to friends of other faiths. So how could I reconcile the Hinduism that I had been schooled in and frankly had confirmed through my own reading, my own observation, my own learnings, how could I reconcile that with these mob lynchers and love jihadis and ghar wapasi types and the whole lot of delirious fanatics who were portraying my faith in a light that I found deeply, deeply revolting. So I said, let me, on the one hand, not approach this debate from outside the pale, because if I were to say that, this is wrong, I would immediately be stereotyped, as indeed I have been for the last few years, as a pseudo-secular with an S-I-C-K, right? I wanted this to be an argument within the Hindu faith, between people who consider themselves to be good Hindus, or decent Hindus, or believing Hindus, or seeking Hindus, whichever phrase you want, but who don't subscribe to this kind of notion of Hindutva, and those who have reduced Hinduism far from the soaring metaphysics and philosophical inquiry and spiritual yearnings of the ancient texts into something more akin to the team loyalty of the British football hooligan. But even if I can reach a small segment of Hindus and give them confidence in their own faith, I will have, I hope, made a contribution to resisting the takeover, the hijacking of Hinduism by forces inimical to its very essence. Politics of identity is on the rise around the world. I don't disagree with that. And people say, why should India be an exception? Well, I believe India should be an exception because we are the kind of extraordinarily diverse society that very few countries are. And therefore we are a wild ethnic mix. We have languages, religions, habits of life, customs, eating habits, and so on, all of which differ from one part of the country to another, from one Indian to another, and yet we're united by a common dream of Indianness, a shared geography, a shared history, and I hope sustained by a democracy that gives us the aspirations for our future. To do that, to maintain that, to build on that, you have to have a citizenship that transcends identity. The great thing about India is you can be many things in one thing. That you can be a good Muslim, a good Keralite, and a good Indian all at once. That's the strength. But I've also argued it is the Indianness that makes you secure in all the other identities. If being a Muslim made you vulnerable, or being a Keralite made you vulnerable, it is being an Indian that protects you. The constitution, the institutions, the democracy, the equal rights, all of this is what gives you your place. And of course the politics as well, which you can't get away from. Give everybody a voice, give everybody a stake, give everybody a possible future. That strength is India's great strength. So I would feel it's worth fighting for. Hindutva is a political ideology, it's really not a religious interpretation. It's a political ideology that has hung itself on a hook that has been embedded in the wall of religion. But it is not actually a religious ideology. What they've done is they have created a political project around the idea that the people who follow the Hindu religion are a distinct people. Some have even used the word Hindu race. They have their own culture, They have their own history, their own heroes. And this collectivity has somehow been humiliated, conquered, subjugated. 200 years of British rule, 1,000 years of Muslim invasions. Now the time has come for them to reassert themselves. And Hindutva is a project to advance the political agenda of those who believe this by trying to create a consciousness of separation amongst these self-defined Hindus. Isn't it ironic? Separatism is supposed to be what minorities do to break away. Pakistan broke away from India as a separatist project. Now we have majority separatism, which is quite a bizarre development, but it's precisely in this way. Now, my rejection of this is that it's actually a philosophy born of inferiority. A self-confident Hinduism is a Hinduism that can embrace others. Your job is to live up to the ideal tenets of your faith. And that's not what you're doing if, while he's trying to be a good Muslim, you're going and hitting him on the head, you're not being a good Hindu. And there is this atavistic fear that they will lose their Hindutva project if people start becoming more liberal in their social attitudes and behaviors. That explains simultaneously a number of things: the opposition to interreligious marriage, the opposition to intercaste marriage, the opposition to gay relationships, anything and everything that cannot be narrowly straitjacketed into some, almost Khap Panchayat ideal of what good Hinduism ought to be, is something that terrifies them. I discuss in the book that in the ancient Hindu thought and scriptures, there are interpretations possible of both sets of approaches. That is, those who will look at the laws of Manu and say this is a very rigid, misogynist and anti-lower caste system of faith sanctified in the laws of Manu, and those who can find in the scriptures and in the various stories told in the religious texts evidence for the opposite. So here you have examples of lessons that are constantly available in the Hindu text, saying do not pay attention to caste and birth and so on. Look at the larger worth of the individual, look at the substance of the issue. And I think that because Hinduism is such an extraordinarily diverse faith, the believer, the reader, the seeker can choose what he wishes to choose from the texts and the materials and the ideas available to him. It's up to you. If you choose the wrong thing, that's your choice. Don't blame Hinduism. Hinduism has offered you an alternative choice. See, the BJP is going on saying we are the only Hindus in the fray, and if, like us, you go to temples, you should be voting for us. Let's get that out of the way, saying we also go to temples. We never showed it in the past, but now we'll show it. So, they go to temples, we go to temples. Now let's talk about development. Let's talk about Vikas. Look, I'm an MP in Thiruvananthapuram where I have various kinds of people in my constituency. I go to temples, I go to mosques, I go to churches all the time. And that kind of politics has always been there in sort of multi-ethnic, multi-religious India. Why shouldn't we practice it with all faiths, including the majority faith?